So, see, for this morning, we're starting a brand new series that we're calling I Want a New Marriage. And so this series is for all of us. It's for married people. It's for single people. It's for divorced people. It is for single people who say, listen, I'm actually quite content in being single. It's for single people who are saying, listen, I want to be married. And so this series that we're starting this morning is for all of us. And so let me straight away set things up for us and tell you that in our house, there is a switch that we absolutely have no idea what it's there for. We've tried. We've done the research. We've tried to try and figure out what this switch does in our house, but we can't figure it out. We have no clue. And so I got in a guy and to try and help us figure out what this switch does. And he gave us two pieces of advice. He said, number one, bring me all the blueprints and the plans for the house, the original plans for the house, and then I'll try and work out what was happening here. So bring all the plans. Bring the blueprints. Then he says, if I can't work it out from the blueprints and the plans for the house, then we'll need to rewire the whole house. And so, church, you know what I did? You know what I did? I decided that bringing up the plans and the blueprints for the house seems like a lot of work. And rewiring the whole house is also going to be costly. And so I decided I'm going to YouTube this. I'm going to go on YouTube and I'm going to try and find if there is another way of getting around this issue. Now, church, what if I told you that many of us are YouTubing our lives? What if I told you that most of us in a room like this will be YouTubing and we are podcasting our way through life? We have a YouTube and we have a podcast for marriage. You have a YouTube and a podcast for your career, for your finances, for your parenting skills. You have a YouTube for almost everything, about everything to do with your life. We are podcasting our way through life. You have a podcast that tells you how to be a good wife. You have a podcast that you listen to on being a good husband. Now listen, some of the stuff that we hear and we pick up on this podcast and these YouTube people is helpful. But if we are to be honest with ourselves this morning, and I want us to be honest with ourselves, the people that we are liking and following and subscribing to, they leave us feeling like we suck at being a wife. They leave us with feelings that I suck at being and doing this husband thing. And so for most of us, our relationships, our marriages are just meh. You know that? The cool kids say, meh. It's not bad, but it's not great either. It's just meh. That's where some of us find ourselves. And for some of us, our marriages, we look more like roommates than a married couple. And for some of us, our marriages look like we are business partners. And so because we're business partners, we meet. We meet to talk about logistics. We meet to talk about the bills. Who's paying what? Who's responsible for what? We need to talk about the kids. What's going to happen? What is their week looking like? Who's going to go to this place and drop them off? We talk about debt. We talk about bills. We meet to argue and to fight. And then we meet to talk about Jonas on the polygamist. For some of us, we're saying, I need a new marriage because I'm not sure if this is what I signed up for. And then we go on Instagram to look at other people's marriages that we actually want for ourselves. So this series is for you, not so? This series is also for me as we think about how do I get a new marriage. So where do we go? Where do you go? Where do we begin? What is the place that we need to go to find how we can get a new marriage? And the answer is we have to go back to the blueprint. We have to go back to God's original plan that He had when he created this thing called marriage and relationships. So listen, if you don't understand Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3, you will never understand yourself. You will never understand other people. You will not understand the world. You won't understand God. You won't understand sin. And so my challenge to you, perhaps this throughout the next 7 days, is to read Genesis 1, 2, and 3, because it will help you to understand who you are. So listen, my problems begin out of bad theology. And theology simply means your understanding of who God is. My problems begin because I don't believe God's word. I'm not convinced that God's word is truth for me. So I have a theological problem before I have any of the other problems that show up in my life. I don't trust God and I don't trust what he has to say. And so this morning, I want us to go back to the original plan of God and begin to trust this original plan of God, the blueprint. And we're going to be unpacking this morning Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27, the passage that we read earlier on. So it'll be useful if you have that passage open in front of you, Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. And if you don't have it in front of you, it'll be appearing on the screen behind me. So let me read those two verses for us and listen carefully to what God's plan is, the blueprint for your life. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness. Let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living creature that moves on the ground." So God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female. He created them. So before we can talk about marriage and relationships, and before we can talk about your life, we need to first and foremost ask the question, what is man? According to God the Creator, what is man? Who am I in the eyes of God's original plan? Who am I? What was God's plan for mankind? And so did you notice it there in verses 26 and 27? Because the answer is right there. Did you see it? Men and women, male and female, are created in the image of God. That's who you are. You are somebody who's created in the image of God. So church, we need to just define some terms here before we go any further. When the Bible uses the word image, it means a carving. It means to cut out. So you are a cutting out of God. You are the carving of God. And the word likeness means to be like. Created to be like God. That's who you are as a human being. And so verses 26 and 27 teach us that you and I are people who represent God as his cuttings, as his likeness here on earth. So friends, we want to dig deeper and unpack these two verses. And we'll look at the principles that come from these two verses, and then we'll apply it to marriage and relationships. So 4 times in these two verses, the words likeness and the words image are used. 4 times. And 4 times in these two verses, the words create and made are used. So you can't miss what verse 26 and 27 are saying. They're saying to us, God created. God made man in his image, his image, his image, his image. You can't miss what verses 25 and 26 and 27 are saying. That this is what it means to be a human being, is to be created in the image of God, created by God. So what does it mean that I'm created in the image of God? What does that mean? What does that look like? Well, it means 3 things that I want us to see. 3 things that what it means to be created in the image of God. These 3 things are the fundamental things that you will need to function as a human being in this life. These are fundamental truths that we need to unpack and understand. 3 things. And so the first one, because I am created in the image of God, it means that I am different. It means that mankind is different, unique from all of God's creation. So watch this in verse 26. Then God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness. So here's what you need to know. In chapter 1, verses 1 to 25, God has been creating. He has been speaking, and it was so. He speaks, and it is so. Listen to this in verse 24. Genesis chapter 1, verse 24. And God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. That's how God has been creating. But when we come to verse 26, notice what he says in verse 26. Then God said, let us make man in our image. This is the first time we hear God speak in this way, in these terms. Let us make man in our image. So verse 26, it tells us that you and I, as God's creatures, as God's mankind, we are different. Designed to be different, distinctly different and unique from all of God's creation. So look at the screen. Look at this guy. Look at this guy. Right? That's how we started off in the picture on your right or on your left. That's how he was born. But then this guy, he's known as the parrot man, and he decided that, listen, I identify more as a parrot than a human being. And so he tattooed his whole body. And he disfigured his whole body because he wants to look like a parrot. He says, I feel like a parrot more than a human being. That's what happens when we don't understand Genesis chapter 26 and 27. He should have read his Bible. Somebody should have taken him to his Bible to remind him that, listen, God created you different and unique from all the other animals because God created you in the image of God himself. Let's go a little bit deeper then, because there's a deep implication. Because I'm created in the image of God, it means that God has given to me, God has deposited in me, God has put in you, God has bestowed on you value, worth, and dignity. Value and worth and dignity are God-given things. So the day that you were conceived in your mother's womb, God gave you dignity, value, and worth. So these are things that I ought not to be running around Josie looking for. And so I don't use my career to validate who I am. I don't use my career, my job, to make me look like I'm valuable. My value is not calculated by how many accomplishments and achievements that I have. It's not based on what letters come before my name. That's not where my worth comes from. It is a God-given thing. It is a God-bestowed thing. So value and worth is found in God and bestowed upon me from God, my Creator. So can I just speak to the single people? Listen, if you are single this morning, your value, your worth, and your dignity doesn't come because you're married. It doesn't come because you're becoming Mrs. So-and-so. That's not where it's found. God has already given you that. And so, for some of us, our families make us seem or feel less than because I'm not married. For some of us, we can't sit with the men because I'm a single man. And so I feel less than. Can I release you from that? Because verse 26 tells us that these things have already been given to you. You don't have to go and prove anything to anybody. You don't live your life in Josie trying to make people think that you have great value. You already obtained that from God who created you in his image. So listen, church. God created you in his image, and he has given you all these things that your heart is searching for, that your heart is longing for. So rest. Rest in what God has given and has done for you. So it means, friends, if this is true, that all human beings, male and female, are created in the image of God, that they have value and worth and dignity, there is no room for racism. There is no room for sexism. There's no room for tribalism. There's no room for xenophobia. There's no room for ageism. There is no room for classism. There is no room for any of the isms that we find in our society today. Why? Because we believe and we know and we understand God's original plan when He created human beings. All of us are made in the image. All of us have this value and worth and dignity bestowed upon us. Now let's talk to the married people. Here's what it means for you as a married person. Your spouse carries worth and value and dignity bestowed on them by God who created them. God says that they are special. God says that they're distinct, they're unique. Do you see your spouse like that? Maybe you say to yourself, oh yeah, there was a time. There was a time, yeah. You know, I remember walking up in a church in front of a pastor, and I looked at this person and I thought, yeah, they've got great value, but yeah, it's faded along the way. Do you still see them that? Because if you're looking at your relationship and say, I need a new relationship, no, you need to change your mind. You need to believe what God says. And then because I believe what God says, I look at my spouse and say, they have dignity, they have value, and they have worth because God created them in their own, in His own image. Their worth and value is not determined by how many cows I paid for them, how much lobola I paid for them. Their dignity, their value and worth is not determined by the bag that they bring in. Because some of us have put it in our heads, I need a spouse who brings in a bag. A proper bag. Because once they bring in a bag, then I will give them the value, the worth, the dignity that they deserve. So are you treating your spouse the way that God would treat them? Do you view your spouse the way that God views them? Are you handling your spouse the way that God would handle them? Because you've come to understand that they're created in the image of God. So how I speak to my wife is important. How I handle my wife is important. Do I give her the honor and the worth and the dignity that God already has bestowed on her? And so we want to take it out also onto the streets, how I handle people, how you handle your team at work, how you handle people in the streets. Does it show that you understand Genesis chapter 1:26, that these are people that God has bestowed honor and value and dignity and worth? Do I handle people the way that God will handle people? That they are special because of the image of God that they bear. And because I understand Genesis chapter 1:26, I can't abuse my wife. I can abuse my spouse, whether verbally, emotionally, or physically. There is no room for abuse here. So notice that all human beings are created in the image of God. And then you sit here and you say, but you don't know my spouse. You just don't know what I'm married to. Listen, it doesn't matter. It's not because of their performance or lack of performance that will cause you to give them the dignity, the value, and the worth. You give it to them whether they're performing well or they're performing poorly. It's not dependent. So you tell yourself, I will behave well, I will treat them well because my partner or my spouse is behaving themselves. I will only treat them well when they treat me well. It's irregardless of that. Whether they're doing what they ought to do and how they're responding to you, you ought to see them as God sees them and treat them the way that God sees them. They're a carving of God. They're a cutting out of God. They are in the likeness of God. So you in this marriage, are you like God? Because you're in the likeness of God. Are you behaving like God in this marriage? And so it brings us to the second thing that I want us to look at this morning. That if you're created, because we're created in the image of God, it means that we represent God. Because we're in the image of God, it means that we represent God. So have a look on the screen. Who's that guy? Not the small one. When I see that, I don't ask that question. And I hope you don't do the same when you see yourself and say, whoa, who's that? You recognize yourself. And when you see that picture, you don't say, oh, I wonder who that is. You say, oh, that's Farai. Not so? Even if I'm not there, present with you, you will say, that's Farai. Because it represents me. It is in my likeness. So God put together a human being and he puts them on earth and he says, they're going to be in my likeness to represent me. And so you as a human being, dear friend, this morning, you are created to represent God, to be like God, to display who God is, to show forth in this world what God is like. You are a mirror of what God is like, to reflect everywhere that you are what God is like. So you and I are ambassadors. And when we begin to think about of an ambassador, we know that an ambassador goes into a foreign country to represent their sending country. And they're there to execute, they're there under the authority of the sending government. They will only do that which the government has sent them to do to carry out the interests of their sending country. That's who you are. You are an image bearer. You're a mirror of who God is. So here's what it means. It means that everything that you do matters. Every single thing that you do matters. Why does it matter? Because you're doing it for God and you're doing it in the name of God. That's why it matters. So your work matters. Your job matters. Why? Because you're doing it for God and you're doing it in the name of God. You represent God in your office, with your colleagues, and you do your job as you go about your day. You are representing God. And I wonder what it is that people see you represent. I wonder what they see and they hear. Because it matters. You're reflecting, you're mirroring who God is in that place. And so Paul says, whatever you do, whether you eat or you drink, do it all for the glory of God, because it matters. So question, are you godlike? When we talk about your relationship, when we talk about your marriage, would people say, will your spouse say, I see God because of the way that I'm treated by this person? Are you godlike? Are you a mirror of what God is like in your marriage with your spouse? So when you speak to them the way that you sometimes do, you know how you speak to your spouse, right? Is it a mirror of God? Is it a mirror of God when you treat them the way you do? You know how you treat your spouse sometimes. When you respond with anger, when you respond with frustration, with impatience, when you are annoyed with your spouse, is that being like God? Because I'm a mirror of who God is. And so if the answer to that question is no, it's not God who needs to change. Guess who needs to change? And we say, I need a new marriage. You need a new mindset. Not so? Is God really like that in your marriage? The way that you treat one another. So can I ask you, how is it going? How is it going, married people? What's happening in that house? What's really going on in that house? How is it going? It is rough. Does it mirror God? And some of us, you're already having an answer to that question, aren't you? To saying, yeah, it is the way it is because of them. If only they did this. If only she does this. If only he could do this, then this marriage will be on fire. Listen, it's not dependent, it's not predicated on what the other person does. It's in my hands because I'm created in the image of God. So I will be these things. Despite what my partner does, despite what my spouse does, I am committed to being the woman, the man that God has created me to be. Because I represent him here. I'm a mirror of who He is in this place. So some of us are telling ourselves, wow, I wish I knew this before I said I do, because maybe I would have said I don't. I wish somebody had told me this. Well, the bad news is, ketile, ketile. You are in there now. But if you're single, these are the T's and C's. This is what you need to know when you're walking into this thing that you're romanticizing so much, that on my wedding day, in my marriage, we're going to be. These are the realities of marriage. That you have been called to represent God. And it is tough because your spouse will not do the things that you think they will do. And yet I'm still to be like God. So as a single person listening to this and you're saying to yourself, maybe I am better off alone. Paul says that's a great decision. That's a good decision. Perhaps you are better off not being married. Because you don't want to take on somebody's child and make vows and commitments. And then you behave like the devil himself, mirroring the devil himself in your marriage. So if you're single, you need to know the T's and C's before you sign up. So what does it mean that we are created in the image of God? Number one, it means that we're different. We have worth, we have value, we have dignity bestowed upon us from God himself. What does it mean that we're created in the image of God? It means that we represent God in our thoughts and words and deeds because it matters. And then thirdly, what does it mean to be created in the image of God? It means relationship. It means relationship. Listen to this in verses 26 and 27. Then God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the air, and over all living creatures that move on the ground. So God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Did you notice something in verse 26? Something that we have not heard in Genesis chapter 1 so far. In verse 26 it starts, then God said, let us. Who is the us in verse 26? Who is God speaking to? So already from verse 26, you and I need to come to a conclusion. If we didn't have the rest of the Bible, you and I need to come to a conclusion that we're dealing with a God who's just not one. There is somebody else with him who is also God. And we meet this second person who is also God in Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. Let me show you. Listen to this. Genesis 1, verses 1 and 2. In the beginning, God. So there is one. There is this God who created the heavens and the earth. And now the earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God. So we have God, and now we have the Spirit of God. So there's two already in Genesis. But this God is just not one. And then as you continue to read the New Testament, especially Colossians chapter 1, verse 15, we are told that Jesus created all things. So Jesus is also present in Genesis chapter 1, although he's not mentioned. And so the Bible is very clear that you and I, our God is three and one. He is a triune God. He is a Trinity God. He is three different persons and yet one. Don't ask me to explain that to you. I can explain it. When you get to heaven, you can ask God about that. But that's how he presents himself, as a God who is three and yet one. And in this Godhead, in this Trinity, they have a perfect relationship with each other. They have a perfect relationship with each other. And it is a relationship that is built on love. It is a relationship that is built on delighting and enjoying each other. It is a relationship that is built on communication. It is a relationship that is collaborative. They work together to achieve a common goal. So when you read Genesis chapter 1, we don't hear God saying, let there be sun. And then the next verse, the Holy Spirit of God, the Spirit of God comes up and he says, well, I don't really like what you're doing. I'm going to do my own thing. They work together to achieve something, to create this universe that you and I enjoy. So because we are created in the image of God, notice this, church, we have the ability to do the same things. We as his creatures, we have the ability to be the same as the God who created us. And so here's 5 things. Here are 5 things for you to take away this morning. 5 things that will lead to a successful marriage based on who God is. 5 things that we're able to do because we're created in the image of God. Number 1, relationship. God is a relational God. And God has created you as a relational person. So your desire for friendships, for community, for an intimate relationship doesn't come from you. We did not come up with this plan to say, oh, it would be nice if we could have relationships. It is a God-given thing. And so your desire for marriage is not a bad thing. It's a God-given thing. And so we are relational beings because God himself is in relationship. And so, as married people, you have a relationship with someone. Not so? I hope you know that. I hope you don't suspect, like, I have more people in this marriage relationship than just my spouse, because that's a problem. You are in a relationship. And relationship is about friendship, isn't it? Marriage is about friendship. And if you are single, you need to know this. It's not just marriage. You are building a friendship with someone. So please find somebody that you can be friends with before you marry them. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem. You'll always be at the pastor's house because you actually don't like this person. So find somebody that you say, I will build a friendship with this person. So in your marriage, is there friendship still? And some of us were like, yeah, there was a time, when we were dating. We were good friends. And then we got married. And now it's like a war zone in our house. We argue all the time. We argue about everything all the time. We don't seem to get along. What happened? We've lost that friendship. So we act more like enemies than friends in our house. So how is your relationship? How is your friendship with your spouse? So maybe today is a good day for you to get back to basics, not so? To go back to the basics and say, I have a spouse. I'm going to try and build a friendship and be a friend to my spouse. So single people, don't be involved with people that you actually don't like. People that you're actually tolerating. Like, I just tolerate this person. I tolerate them. And it seems okay with this person of yours because you get to go home. Now, when you're married, there's no going home. You are on 24/7 with this person that you're tolerating. It's going to end in tears. And then the second thing is love. Is love. So do you still love each other? And church, I'm not saying do you still have the heebie-jeebies? Do you still have the butterflies? Because some of us, the butterflies have gone. It's been 20-something years. So you look at your spouse and go, meh. So it can't be that. And some of us gauge our love on the barometer of the heebie-jeebies and the butterflies. Like, I don't feel the butterflies anymore. So that means I'm no longer in love. And because I don't feel the butterflies, I start catching butterflies where I shouldn't be catching butterflies. I start seeing other people and thinking, I made a mistake. This is the person I ought to love because it comes easy. It flows. But when I get home, I get out of the car, I get into my house, I just get bombarded by this person. I don't feel anything. In fact, I think I actually hate them. I don't want to be around them. But when I'm at the office with my office wife, it is fire. Why? Because you get to leave. Don't forget that part. You get to leave. Do you know why an affair is such an attractive thing? It's because you do what you want to do, no strings attached, and you get to leave. It's not real. And so you don't gauge your love based on the heebie-jeebies and the butterflies. Because that's not what God did for you. The love that God displays is a sacrificial love. It is a love that is self-giving, that gives of itself for the better of somebody else, for the benefit of someone else. And so is there love in your marriage right now? And for some of us, we say it's tough because we've got the kids. The kids are young, they're demanding, they're always crying. I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. I have no space to love anybody right now because I'm finished. And for some of us, we say, I don't have love because this person frustrates me. They hurt me. They have disappointed me. They have let me down. And so I'm going to withhold my love. I withhold. If some of these married people were to be honest, they should be saying amen louder than they are right now. So listen, what do you do when the love is gone? When there is no love in that relationship, that marriage anymore? What do? Well, we go back to God who created me in his image, who has perfect love within the Trinity, who has given me the ability to be like him, to mirror him and love this way. And I ask God, help me to love my spouse. Amen? That is what we do because we understand Genesis 1, 26 and 27. That's the outworkings of that. Lord, would you help me to love as you love? Then the third thing is we delight and enjoy. We delight and enjoy. Because God in this Trinity, he delights and he enjoys. Jesus says so. I delight to do that which my Father has called me to do. I do that which my Father has called me to be. So it involves spending time. If I'm going to delight and enjoy my spouse, we need to spend time together. And some of us, we cry out right now, but he's never around, she's never around. She's working all the time, he's working all the time. And because they're working all the time, I feel guilty of asking for time with my spouse because they're trying to build a life for us. Friends, there will come a time where you're so drifted apart, you don't even know each other. What good is that $1 billion that you've got in your bank account and you've lost your spouse? Because you're working. Or you're spending time with the boys or the girls. It's always a girls' thing. Girls' weekend, girls' this, girls... away from your spouse. So you never have time to enjoy and to delight in one another. So there's a stat that came out a few years ago that said that people in their 60s are most likely to get divorced than any other age group. And you know why that happens? It's because you've been working so much. You've been building your career. Now you're retired. You've been concentrating and the kids have been the focal point in your house. The kids have grown and they've left. And then one day you wake up and you have this old person next to you that you call your spouse. And you don't even know this old person. And you even look at them and you say, do I want to know this old person? And so the easiest thing for you to do is to get divorced. That's where it ends up. Why? Because we have not been practicing the art of delighting and enjoying each other. So when you were dating, you loved your spouse's weird laugh. Now it annoys you, like, yo, I wish they could change. Friends, delight and enjoy, because that's what you signed up for. So find a way to delight and enjoy that laugh. Delight and enjoy spending time together. So her husband was asked, would you rather A, spend time with your wife on holiday, or B? Then say B! Before he even heard what B was. B! Then the fourth thing that we find here is that there is communication in the Godhead. So God the Father speaks, the Spirit of God executes. And when it is done, they say, it is good. They communicate. And so, what that means for you and I is that we are capable of communicating with one another. For some of us, we're singing the Boys to Men song. I don't really know what we argue about. We don't really talk anymore. So friends, today's the day, isn't it? Today's the day to remind yourself, I can communicate. We live in a society that has given men an oath to say that men don't talk. They do talk. They might not be talking to you. And if they're not talking to you as the spouse, that means they're talking to somebody else. And that's how we become caught up in emotional affairs. That's why we have emotional affairs. Because your spouse is not speaking to you. Doesn't mean they're not speaking. They're speaking to somebody else. Somebody else has stepped in. And they're fulfilling the part that you ought to play. And an emotional affair eventually ends up in a physical affair. People don't just wind up in bed together. It's a series of events that leads to that. That's just the obvious end result, that we ended up sleeping together. But it started a long way back. It started when we stopped communicating. But I have a need to talk. And so I should talk to my spouse. And if you're single, if you can't talk to your person, you can go on WhatsApp and say, it's okay, it's me, it's not you. Let's end it. Find someone you like to talk to and communicate with. Then the last thing that we want to talk about before we pray together is there's working together. There's a collaborating for a purpose that we find in the Godhead. And God gives us that ability to collaborate, to talk, and to plan, and to achieve something. So God planned and He achieved the creation of the universe. Do you have a plan for your family? Is there a plan? Or are we just winging it? We got married 10 years ago and we're just going. Today is Monday, it's Tuesday. By the time you know somebody's dead and they're buried, what was your marriage about? What was it that you wanted to achieve? What was it that you wanted to do that benefits not just you and your spouse and your family, that benefits and impacts the world? Because when God collaborated, it impacted the whole world. It was beautiful for all of creation. What is it that you and your spouse are doing for the benefit of the world? What is your marriage about? Maybe today is the day that you sit down as a family to say, we need a plan. And it can't just be we want to make money, we want to be successful, we want to be seen on Instagram and have likes. That is a very shallow plan. Look at a plan that will impact into eternity. A gospel plan that this is what we want to do as a family. This is what we want to achieve as God enables us for the benefit of other people. Because what God does is for the benefit of other people. So listen, friends, we've all failed. We have all failed. I've failed to be the image bearer that God has called me to. You have failed. But there's good news this morning. The good news is that Jesus, when He comes to restore that which is broken. He comes to put back that which is dysfunctional. And so this morning He's inviting you to Himself. He's not saying go and try harder, go and run faster, go and do more. He's saying come to me. And I will show you the man and the woman that you ought to be. And I will show you the relationship, the marriage that I've called you to. So today's a great day where you can come to Jesus with that brokenness and say, will you fix this? Will you take this and make much of it for your glory?